Well, good morning, everybody. Daniel Whited right here in Denver, and welcome to the Doctor's Clinic Call, where the world's your waiting room, and the truth is they're waiting on you to share with them what's going on with life-changing, revolutionary, products. And so, Doc, good morning. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing so excellent. Dorland's Medical Dictionary actually got a hold of me, and they want my picture for the word excellent.
Submit it immediately because it belongs right there by it, brother. Oh, I'm loving it. And so, but what? Tell me what we're jumping into. What are we going to fire into today?
Well, I wanted to cover a little bit on cancer today.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's do it.
I think it's a great topic, and there's a lot of things we need to talk about.
Well, I mean, it used to be back in the day, it was about 1 out of 500 would hear the words, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you got cancer. And now it's 1 out of 3 the doctor has to say those words to, you got cancer. And so things are not, it's just a lot of people don't realize how food has changed, environment's changed, exposure to even lower levels and high levels of radiation have changed. And, it's just, for an example, Doc, our grandparents and great-grandparents, they would eat biscuits and gravy all the time, and they wouldn't get ginormous, big as a barn, because they had 40% protein in it. And so, but the food is and take wheat for an example, it's depleted of its protein now. It's down to less than 4% protein. It was 7 about 5 years ago, and now it's down to 4% protein. So say what you want, things have changed. Toxicity has gone to an all-time high, with the Roundup. Of course, they'll change other names and the whole bit. But toxicity is everywhere. But, Doc, we just appreciate you, man. And, let's just jump right into it. Where do you want to start?
All right. Do we have the recording on?
We're good to go.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that go on. Well,
yeah, I was probably talking over it, Doc. Sorry about that.
No problem. You're so dead on. When you talk about the toxicity and when you talk about the cancer rates and things like that, and just looking at the rates, you have to admit to yourself, we know the cause of cancer. The President's Council on Cancer back in 1972 during the Nixon era, they said we will cure cancer in the next 5 years. But that hasn't happened. And then the National Institutes of Health, they said, oh yeah, we'll find a cure for cancer. Well, that hasn't happened. And when you take a look at it, cancer rates have gone up and up and up. And you hear some doctors telling us, they're saying, oh yeah, hey, we're really making some breakthroughs with cancer. Well, yeah, in certain cancers. Certain cancers like childhood type cancers, they've made some huge breakthroughs, but really as far as the battle against cancer, we're not winning. We're not winning, right?
We're not even close. We're, if you would, yeah, we're not winning. On a scale 1 to 100, we're not even hitting 5%. When you talk about what really happens. But we do have some options for people, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the whole thing is that, DW, you and I know that, and everybody else knows too, cancer is big business. There's a lot of money being made on cancer treatment, and the powers that be, they control that. And so what we want to do is, what I want to talk about on this call is not how to cure cancer, not how to prevent it, not how to treat it or anything like that, because we really can't use those words. When we're talking about the types of things that we do, the types of things that we recommend, we have to admit that we can't talk about that. And what we want to talk about is, how do we enhance the body's natural system? How do we optimize the body's health so that one can fight it a little bit better? But the other thing is what can we do to enhance those chemotherapy drugs that people are already on, right? Because I haven't ever been diagnosed with cancer, and I tell people now, I'm like, hey, if I did get diagnosed, I wouldn't use any of those chemotherapy agents. But really, when you get those scary words, right? When somebody says, hey, DW, I've got something to say, it's not good news, and when your doctor says that, who knows what you might do? And that's what I've been told by a number of my patients. I mean, they're like, Kurt, you're not here, and you're not in this position. You have to make a decision, and it's a scary one. And most people do choose to go the chemotherapy route. So why don't we be honest with ourselves and everybody and just say, hey, let's find a way of making those drugs even work better.
Well, it wasn't too long ago, and I was on was watching a segment on one of the doctor shows, and a doctor said, we're going to look back, maybe even 7, no longer than 10 years from now, and talk about how barbaric, how horrid our practice of chemotherapy has been. He said it is 100% the wrong approach, period. And he goes, there's just so much money in it, they won't make the change to what really can make an impact. So he was verifying, and of course, people hate this guy's guts because he's saying the truth. But he talked about how barbaric it's like, way back in before doctors really became full-fledged doctors and stuff, they would just, if something didn't work, they just cut it off, or they thought, wow, if you're sick, just drain all your blood out of your body, and just debauchery they did to the body trying to make it better way back in the day. He said, we're going to look at this and see how barbaric and how bad it really is. And so that got my attention. It really made me think, a little bit different. So things are backwards. If someone rejects chemotherapy, people think they're the crazy ones. And reject some of these other treatments, people think that, oh man, that guy's crazy, or they're a nut, or they're whatever. And it will be reversed sometime at some point. They won't have a choice, because it's running rampant right now. Cancer is.
That's right. And the whole thing is, so let's talk a little bit about chemotherapy. What's the whole idea? What's the premise behind chemotherapy drugs? And really what it's designed for is to inflict massive damage to the DNA of the cancer cells. And that way the cancer cells will destroy themselves. That's the whole idea behind chemotherapy. And radiation therapy, the whole idea behind radiation therapy is let's break the DNA strands in the cancer cell. I mean, that's simply what they're trying to do. Well, the problem with it is that as you're killing the cancer cell by destroying the DNA either by radiation or chemotherapy with drugs, you sacrifice healthy cells. And so the whole thing is that, is there a way of making the body so that the healthy cells can survive the chemo? And that's really what I thought we'd focus on today, is what can we do to make it that way so that the toxicity isn't so bad that it kills the host, the person that has the cancer, but it still makes the chemo or the radiation effective, right? And the last thing we want to do is recommend a nutritional product that makes the chemo ineffective, because now you have those people, in my case, my patients, going through treatment, and they're having horrible side effects, and then they come to find out that what if the nutritional product that I recommended actually made it so that the chemo didn't work as good as you wanted it to. And so that's the last thing that we want. So as a physician, I really have to focus on that. And as you guys, lay people out there that are recommending nutritional product, I think it should be something that's running through your mind. Are we making the right recommendation? Are we in enhancing the system, or are we actually making it so it doesn't work as good? And it's a touchy subject. It's a touchy subject, right? And I know when my brother was going through chemo, the doctors at Mayo, they don't understand what I understand. They don't understand natural medicine. I mean, and at least they admitted it to my brother. They said, well, we don't know anything about that, right? And they sent my brother to the department at Mayo Clinic. I didn't even realize they had a department, but they sent him to the department that deals with alternative and natural therapy. And when my brother got there with the list of things that I was recommending, and I wrote it all out. I wasn't afraid to hide anything. I wrote it all out. And when he got there, they basically, they said, "Oh, we don't know what any of this is." What do you think of that?
Well, I think some of those guys, you know what I really think? Like all those guys are educated idiots. I mean, they don't care enough to care. And of course, that sounds kind of brutal. And, Doc, I don't mean to beat docs up because, you know, they're probably doing the best they can with what they have where they're at. However, who's sat there and going to take a nuclear bomb and blow up an entire country? You know, that's what you're doing to yourselves. You know, when you said, what does chemo, what does radiation do? And that doctor talked about those two things that I mentioned earlier. What it does, you know, and you said that question. I had it on mute, and I looked at Helen. I said, kills everything. It's not like it has the ability to go in there and separate and attack the cells and the whole 9 yards. Plus, it totally, Doc, here's a side effect that is absolutely devastating. It annihilates. And look up the word annihilate in the dictionary and look at it. It annihilates the immune system, just to start with. And when you're under cancer, what you need stronger than ever before is your immune system built up, not putting something so radical that eradicates every cell and kills the immune system. That's the opposite of what the body needs. This is why it drives you and I banana sandwiches and just gets us aggravated. And so that's what I think. In case you asked.
Well, yeah. I read probably.
Was that too harsh? Was that too harsh there, Doc?
What's that?
Was that a little too harsh there?
Oh no, I mean I think you're right. You know, my son's going to medical school right now, and I've learned a lot from him because I used to think that some of these doctors, they're just so involved with making big salaries and things like this. But I was talking to my son, and he said, Dad, he said, we're just doing what we're taught, right? And they're so busy trying to treat disease, and there's a lot of sick people out there, and they're so busy trying to treat disease that they don't have time to review the stuff that I'm reviewing, and they don't have time to review the stuff that you're doing. Like I just this morning, just for this call, for a half-hour call, I reviewed 20 research articles, right? And if we could get every doctor, every oncologist to review 20 research articles for every single patient that they treat, we'd have a lot better changes. But they're so busy because there's so many sick people that, like my son said, it's amazing. I mean, he had one patient that came in to see him at the hospital down there, and this guy had seen 16 different doctors, and you know, most of the time what the doctors do is they review the other doctor's report, and then they just continue to treat what the first doctor said. And so 16 doctors continued to treat based on what the first doctor diagnosed, and this patient comes into the hospital, and my son read 300 pieces of paper on this patient, and after reading 300 pieces of paper, you know, because the VA doesn't use electronic records, they use paper records, and he concluded that the first doctor was wrong.
Wow.
And so 15 other doctors made the wrong diagnosis, the wrong prognosis, because they were all going on the first doctor's diagnosis. And my son, who's a third-year medical student, he said, they're all wrong. And think about that in the hospital. You got third-year medical student that's just saying, you know, these 16 experts are wrong. And he got the hospital where he was working to look at it, and they went, holy cow, you're right. And they totally radically changed the treatment on what this patient was having, and the outcome was a lot better, you know, because you have to have the right thing. But if they're not looking for the right thing, they're not going to find the right thing. And so, you know, cancer cells, they can mutate really quickly, just like viruses. And that's why, you know, you see a lot of doctors who study viruses are really good at treating cancer because they understand how viruses mutate. And so cancer cells are mutated, dysfunctional versions of healthy cells. Mutated, dysfunctional versions of healthy cells. They're adapted for survival, and they divide really, really rapidly, And most of the time, they're more vulnerable to chemotherapy than most healthy cells, and that's why we use chemotherapy. Otherwise, we wouldn't use it at all. And that's where the chemotherapy drugs work, is during the cell division. And unfortunately, because these cancer cells can mutate really quickly, they can adapt to the chemo and they can hide from it, and they can become resistant, and they can develop this resistance during the early rounds of the chemotherapy, and so what happens is as they develop this resistance against the chemotherapy, obviously it's not going to work, right? So now what we're doing is we're seeing this, and I started using genetic profiling way back in 1999 after the Human Genome Project came out. And I remember, here in Fargo, North Dakota, I'm doing genetic profiling, and I'm saying, hey, this is the future of medicine. And, that was nearly 20 years ago. And I got ridiculed by internal medicine doctors up here. They're like, who do you think you are? What are you doing? What are you doing that for? That's not going to prove anything. But now they're finding that they can take your genetics and they can say, Kurt or DW, here's the chemo that's going to work the best in your body based on your genetics. And they can do chemosensitivity testing, and they can find out what chemo is going to work the best. And then you can do something called intermittent fasting, right? And we talked about that this last winter when DW and I were talking, when we spent 12 weeks talking about dieting, about losing weight. We talked about intermittent fasting, and that's basically where, like let's say today I eat lunch, here at noon. It's 11:15 now, so if I eat lunch at noon and then I don't eat again until 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, right? Or that would be too late. But if I don't eat until breakfast tomorrow morning, that's 17 hours that I went without eating. I don't eat anything. I just drink water. And if I did that 17-hour fasting, that's intermittent fasting. Who couldn't do that twice a week? Who couldn't do that twice a week? Eat lunch today and then don't eat again until breakfast tomorrow, right? And if you did that twice a week, they're finding that if you do that, it protects you against the chemotherapy side effects. But what it also does is it sensitizes the cancer cells to the effects of the chemotherapy. So I'm going to say that again. It makes your body so you don't have the side effect, but it makes the cancer cells more susceptible to death from the chemo. Think about that. Intermittent fasting, if you do that twice a week, you're going to make your chemo work better. And so I went to a couple seminars years ago, and they talked about insulin potentiation therapy. And what they found is that if they gave patients insulin before they gave them the chemo, it did the same thing. It sensitized the chemo. It sensitized the cancer cells to the chemo, and it made it so that the patient had less side effects just simply by giving them insulin. And they're finding the same thing with metformin, which I don't like drugs, but here's a way of taking the drugs and actually making it so that it's effective, making the chemo. So if you're going to do chemo, why not make it so it's even more effective, right? By doing something like that. I mean, DW, doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, that's making sense. But let me drill back a little bit on the. So what you're suggesting, if I'm understanding this correct, is to just no supplements, no nothing. Have breakfast, have lunch, whatever. Then don't eat anything or have anything except water until the next morning, twice a week, like say Monday, Friday, or Monday, Thursday.
Exactly, because like we talked
the body
about,
and resets the cells, or
Yeah.
I mean, biblical talks about fasting for health reasons too. I'm and that's like one of the oldest research things out there. But that's really kind of got my attention.
Yeah, and you and I talked about it last winter in that 12 weeks that we talked about weight loss, is that it's good for weight loss too if you do intermittent fasting. So why not do it for weight loss, but at the same time in the back of your mind, that you're helping yourself as far as cancer prevention. I mean, holy cow, right? I mean, you're killing two birds with one stone. So then, I'm not going to get into all the chemo drugs and things like that. I've spent a lot of time reading about them this morning and last night and that. But you look at some of these chemo drugs. What do? Well, they alkalize the body. You take the carboplatin, the cisplatin, some of these the different drugs. What do? They make your body more alkaline, right? They make your body more alkaline. Well, what also makes your body more alkaline? Dark green leafy vegetables, right? And so again, if a drug is working because it makes your body more alkaline, wouldn't it make sense that let's eat more food that makes your body more alkaline, right? Let's drink some water that makes your body more alkaline. Oh, really? What kind of water is that? Oh, it's hydrogen water, right? And what other product do we have that makes your body more alkaline? Well, of course, the Spectrum Max, because of all the nutrients that are in there, right? Then you look at some of these other drugs. They interfere with the metabolism, and it interferes with the DNA synthesis in the cancer cells, and so we can use different things to help boost that. They've got some other ones that work like anti-tumor antibiotics, right? And so we can boost the body's immune system, things like that. We've got different things that we can help make the system so it actually works better. And there's all sorts of ways that you can do the chemo with IV, oral, different things like that. And again, I've never had cancer, so I've never had to make that choice. But what I'm saying is that if you can enhance that, if you're going to decide to go that route, what are some of the things that you can do to actually make it better? And so one of the things that I want to talk about is that some natural compounds actually exhibit like interactions with cancer cells that enhance the anti-cancer cytotoxicity of the chemotherapy. So it makes the chemo actually work better. And that. So one mechanism with cancer cells eliminate toxins is something called a P-glycoprotein. And so what happens, it pumps the chemotherapy out of the cancer cells. So we give the person chemotherapy, and the cancer cell is sitting there going, hey, we don't want any of that. And it's throwing it out as fast as you're putting it in. And so what it does, it makes the cancer cells so it's resistant to these different drugs. So what can you take that will actually stop that? It'll stop the cancer cell from doing that. Green tea. There's an extract in green tea called EGCG from green tea, right? And we have our Essential Green Tea, which is high in the EGCG. I think we actually add EGCG green tea extract to a couple other products, curcumin, right? And what it does, it inhibits this P-glycoprotein in the cancer cell. So basically what it does, it stops the cancer cell from kicking the chemo out, right? And so it's actually going to make the chemo work better. And so, like when my brother was diagnosed with cancer, that was two of the things that I said, here's two things that you want to be on right away, right? Here's two things right away that you want to be on, green tea and curcumin, right? And so that was one of the things that I talked about. There's other things that help, like quercetin, and what it does, it helps with the liver so that the liver doesn't detoxify the chemo as quickly. It makes it so it's more effective. It keeps it intact, and makes it so it works better. Omega-3s are really good because right alongside with chemotherapy and radiation therapy, what it actually does, it makes it so that the chemo works better. Something as simple as fish oil, right? And it sensitizes colon cancer cells to the chemo. So it'll actually take and if you want to make it so that your healthy cells aren't getting the side effects, but your cancer cells are more sensitive, fish oil. And it makes it so it works better. Melatonin is a hormone that's involved with the sleep-wake cycle, but it increases the tumor so that it can be more sensitive to the chemotherapy and makes it so you don't have to have second, third rounds of it. Certain mushrooms, of course, are really good. Vitamin C, ginseng, vitamin E, taurine, vitamin D, and these are just different things. I'm trying to talk rather quickly here, because the whole thing is that as we're trying to help somebody that's been diagnosed, we don't want to be that person that says, oh, don't do that, because legally you can't do that. Legally you don't have the right to say, oh, don't do that, because you're not the person's doctor. In fact, most people that are probably listening to this call aren't doctors at all, and so you really don't want to do that. But what you can say is, hey, what if you took this to your doctor? Here's some information that says it enhances what you're doing, right? I mean, take a look at CoQ10. CoQ10 has been proven to help with one of the side effects of chemo, because one of the side effects of chemo is that it damages the heart, and a lot of people have heart failure after they've gone through chemo. Well, CoQ10 actually helps protect against that cardiac damage, right? And it improves the survival rate afterwards, right? And most conventional oncologists, they're unaware of this type of research. And so what I'm suggesting to everybody that's listening to the call, go online and look up this research. You can go to the different websites, and you can see pubmed.gov, pubmed.gov, and you can pull up a research article, and you can hand it to the person. You say, hey, take this to your doctor, right? And all you have to look up is CoQ10 enhancing cardiac function after chemo, and so they can take that, right? And now you're not pretending to be a doctor, and that's the worst thing that I hear about from people on my side of the coin, from the doctors on my side of the coin. They're saying, oh, you guys think that you can cure everything. So why don't we decide that, hey, we're not going to be that guy, and what we're going to do is we're going to be the guy that just says, hey, why don't we help the doctors? Why don't we help them? And then they can look at this research and go, wow, CoQ10, right? What about NAD? You know, we've heard a lot about the age pill recently, and people have been asking me, well, you know, what does it do, in case you have chemo? Well, I mean, the thing about it is that there's kind of a conundrum there that, does it make the cancer cells stronger so it's more resistant? And the jury's still out on that one. The jury's still out. So like I had a patient the other day. He's got 5 weeks of chemo, and I just told him, I said, you know what? I said, I'm not sure yet. And I told him, I said, in my opinion, I said, if I had 5 weeks of chemo, I just wouldn't take it for 5 weeks. And I know some of you on the phone are shaking your head, no, Kurt, I didn't want to hear that, right? But come on. We got to do what's best for the client, and we got to do the best for our people. And so what I just told him, I said, just stay off for 5 weeks. It's 5 weeks. You've gone 60 years without it. So what's another 5 weeks, right? And then when you get on it, though, when you get done with your chemo, bump up the age pill and the NR and the R-lipoic acid, because it's going to boost your NAD levels. And what that's going to do is it's going to help with the neuropathy, right? The neuropathy caused by the chemo. It's going to help with the fatigue caused by the chemo. So it's one of those things that you want to do afterwards, right? So sometimes you have to look at it that way, and you have to, I mean, I'm just trying to bring the information to you, DW, and that's what we have to do as networkers, right? We're not doctors. Most of you aren't doctors, so that's kind of how I look at it. But if you can assist those people, I mean, man, I'll tell you what, I've been using nutritional products for over 30 years with my clients. I've treated over 6,000 patients over the years, and one of the things that I found is that when we take a look at what we have here with Sisel, what we have our hands on is we've got some of the most potent nutritional products on the planet. And if we can get other people to understand it, if we can get doctors to understand that, they'll start looking at it. But we just have to approach it from the right way, which is really, here's something that you can use with your patients that'll enhance what you're already doing, versus use this instead of what you're using, right? I mean, you hear the difference in that, DW?
Oh, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt when you're talking about the alkaline and everything. Our Sisel grains, I've been kind of like jumping into that. It's pretty impressive what's in there, Doc.
Yeah, right?
I was like, wow. I mean, I knew it was okay. It's good. It's Tom stuff, whatever. You dive down into what's in there, and it could really be a game changer for a lot of people. Because it's just everything you're talking about is in there as well. So we do have a regimen that people can jump on, and they can do their own personal case study on how the results are turning in for them, and watch their numbers go lower, and their strength, their stamina gets stronger, and their immune system gets stronger. So Doc, you're right on track, man. What an awesome call.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to know what you know, right? And it's another thing to try and get other people to understand what you know, because, I mean, let's face it, it's a stressful world out there, and when Uncle Bob is so busy trying to figure out how to make enough money to pay for his house payment this month. And he gets diagnosed with cancer, the last thing that he's going to want to do is have to argue with his doctor at MD Anderson or Mayo or one of the other big cancer treatment centers, and that's what they're facing. That's what they're facing. When I was talking to my brother, I mean, he told me, he said that's the thing, is that he felt like he had to argue with his doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not cool.
And no, not cool at all. So that's kind of what I really wanted to get across today when I was actually talking to a patient of mine yesterday who just got diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, and I was sharing that with him. And he said, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do the chemo. And I said, well, that's a decision you have to make. I'm not your doctor, right? Exactly. And that's what you and I and everybody else that's listening to the call, we need to learn how to say those words. I'm not your doctor. However, I found some interesting information. I found some compelling information that I want you to take a look at, right? So now what you're doing is you're passing on the information, right? You're not selling a product. You're not marketing a product. What you're doing is you're giving the information, you're sharing the information with people, and now you can't get yourself in any trouble, right? And I hear that all the time. Like I have a friend of mine in Chicago who was battling stage 4 colon cancer, and we got her taking a few things, and her stage 4 colon cancer went from stage 4 to a polyp in 4 weeks, right? I mean, that's what we were able to do with her. I mean, think about that, from stage 4 to a polyp, and her doctor said, what are you doing? And exactly. she was so scared. She was afraid that they were going to take her products away, that she wouldn't tell
them. Well, here's the thing about it. This may sound rude, but I mean, my attitude is this. When I go in and I hire somebody to provide a service or information or a treatment, I've hired them, and I've hired them because of their experience, their knowledge, their information. But it's still, which, and we have if we're not going to get a doctor that at least doesn't listen, then we got a chance to move on. I mean, if someone would sit there and look at Fucoid and say, yeah, this will hurt you, if a doctor said that to me, I'd put my fastest pair of tennis shoes on. I'd run as far away from him as I could until he's educated. So I love what your son said. It kind of brings some hope back into things. And, of course, Doc, 30 years ago, if you said anything about natural, they threw tomatoes at you and booed you off stage. Now docs are listening more, and so we come across kind of harsh or whatever, but they are listening. And, when you say, Doc, I'm my own personal case study testimony here, here's what's happening, here's what I'm doing, it makes a difference. So,
oh, God.
We're going to continue on with this. Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, when I applied for my health insurance here in January, because I was switching over to one of these Medishare type of plans versus being covered under the ACA type of plan, my rates dropped by by 2/3, and I had to be interviewed before I could get accepted into the club. Let's call it the club. And they said, well, who's your doctor? And I paused for a little bit because I knew what I wrote on the application, and I paused for a little bit, and I said, me? And they said, how can you be your own doctor? I said, I think everybody should be their own doctor.
Great answer. Woohoo! Sorry, that was a good, wow. Doc, what are we going to get into next week? We're going to continue on about how to be your own doctor? Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, let's wing it. Let's wing it. Let's see what people, email me at drkurtvisnick@gmail.com. Email me or hook up with me on Facebook, and just send me some information on what do you want us to talk about, because this is your call, this is your waiting room, and DW, I think that's what we ought to do, and just let's see what people want to hear about, because man, there's so many topics involved with health. What can we do? And what can we do about this? What can we do about that? I mean, I'd really like to get into the topic of more information on anxiety and depression, because that affects 50 to 60% of the population, right? Why not? Now, why not? If somebody's interested in that, let's talk about that.
I love it. We're in. Sounds awesome. So we're just gonna wrap it. Call that a wrap for the day. Thanks everyone so much for being part of the Doctor's Clinic call, and Dr. Kirk Visnick, your Sisel's resident doctor for all of us. And I hear all the time about people reached out to you and they get to hear back and get information from you. And so from them, I'm telling you thank you, and from all of us, thank you. You're a difference maker. You're an incredible man as a person, awesome as a doc, switched on science mind. There's so many things about you that we love, honor, and respect. And thank you for being a part of what we're doing here and a part of people's lives with common sense and practical science and wisdom. We love it. Everybody, that's it. Pop this out to someone that may have gotten the news. Sorry that doctor comes to you and say, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you've got cancer. We can make a difference, all the way with diet, exercise, and not eating for about 20 hours, it sounds like, not even 24. I mean, my goodness. So that's kind of interesting there as well. Everybody, God bless you. Thanks for being part of the Doctor's Clinic call. Doc Kurt Visnick, thank you, buddy. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.